Good evening. I call to order the meeting of the Oxford Public School Committee meeting this evening. The Oxford High School Community Room, 6 p.m., 6:02 p.m. First item on the agenda this evening is the reorganization of the school committee. So I would ask for a nomination for chair.
I nominate, if I may, Mr. Coonan again for chair.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Mr. Coonan?
Thank you.
Welcome back as chair, and you can take over the meeting for the rest of the appointments and nominations.
Thank you, Dr. Nash.
You're welcome.
Thank you, board members. We also welcome our newest elected member, Mr. Corey Burke. We're sitting here and welcome to the board. He comes with a vast array of knowledge and experience, both in the town and education. At this point, I would solicit nominations for vice chairman.
I nominate Dave Pinocchio for vice chair.
I have a nomination for Mr. Canacchioli. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor of Mr. Canacchioli, please say aye.
Aye.
Let the record show. 5 in the affirmative. Mr. Canacchioli, thank you. And for secretary.
I nominate Palmina Griffin for secretary.
I'll second it.
And we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the record show. Mr. Griffin, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so tonight, I know it's strange, and we don't, and this is kind of like the new normal, that we will be meeting quite a bit. Dr. Nash, administrators, are here tonight. We're putting together some intensive teams to try and navigate the reopening process, whatever it is. And there are guidelines from the state. There are suggestions by the state, but we're really laying a lot on our administrators, and particularly Dr. Nash and her staff, and she will hear from her tonight, on how all this looks in her eyes and towards the committee. So, actually, before that, we do have the NEASC update. Mr. Nugent, do you have an update for the NEASC for us?
Yes. I do. I do it by memory because I put my glasses on, they fog out.
Okay.
Very briefly, we were contacted 2 weeks ago by NEASC and asked if we could postpone our visit. Talking to the superintendent, we gratefully agreed, and so we're moving from spring of 21 to the fall of 21. They don't have a specific date yet, but it'll be the 21-22 school year. This year, the faculty will be working on bringing the vision of the graduate to life. I'm sorry. We're going to design and implement school-wide rubrics based on the vision of the graduate. And as far as guidance, we took the first step in the right direction. Today we had a welcome Zoom meeting with Naviance, a really great online program that's going to really streamline the work of the guidance department so they can get out there and get into classes more.
Thank you. For the people at home, can you just tell us very, very briefly what Naviance is?
Well, Naviance it's been around for a while, but it's grown. Its primary purpose when it first came up was college applications, and it's lined up with the universal application, the Common App, sorry, and it's one-stop shop. And teachers can upload their recommendations to it. It goes right to the colleges they're applying to. Guidance can upload and send transcripts. But there's also curriculum, school curriculum, social emotional learning curriculum. And they got a meeting with myself and Mr. Phillips and Mr. Truax on Monday. And then for the data upload. And then we have 20 hours of professional development with them that we'll have throughout the year for the guidance counselors.
And there is a student-parent component as well.
Yes.
So it's excellent in terms of communication.
Yep.
Instead of sending emails out, everything's in your data warehouse.
Right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and they were also subscribed to the alumni report, so we can grab data from alumni, how they're doing, post high school and everything like that. So very exciting.
Very good, very exciting. Thank you. Okay. Move right ahead. Dr. Nash, your report to the school committee?
Yes, before, Mr. Chair, you do that, could we ask that the committee revote, or vote for the school committee member to sign the warrant, and also on your standing subcommittees? Could we do that? That was your item, assignment of 2 of the subcommittees this year.
Okay, we don't, I'm not going to, subcommittees, we're not ready for that yet with a
Okay.
new member.
All right.
And that is a chair appointment, so,
Can we do the warrant? The
We can do the
individual to
warrant,
sign the
yes.
warrant? Okay.
yes. Do I have a nomination or a volunteer to sign the warrant? Last in the past, I know Mrs. Forbes, it's a lot of extra time, and thank you, Mrs. Forbes, for doing that. Is anyone else willing to come in and do that, or are we all
I'll
going?
volunteer.
Thank you, Mrs. Griffin. Okay.
Thank you for your efforts.
Okay. Also, to the consent agenda, we did have the minutes of the meeting from June 22nd, 2020. Has everyone had a look, take a look at it, and entertain a motion to approve those minutes of June 22nd, 2020?
I make the motion to approve
Moved.
minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded.
We'll
All-
all, excuse me, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, we'll need to vote for the person who was
Oh.
authorized. Need to, that's a vote.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
All right. So we do, I will come right back to that, but let's get his way. I move in a second on the minutes of the meeting from June 22nd. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstain? One abstention.
Abstain.
4 in the affirmative, 1 abstention. Entertain a motion to name Mrs. Palomina Griffin as authorized signer for the school committee.
I make the motion.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show, 5 in the affirmative. Thank you, Mrs. Griffin, for that. We're all set, Helen? Thank you. And
Thank you.
keeping things, okay? Okay, Dr. Nash, back to you.
All right, thank you, thank you. So I may take things a little bit out of order this evening,
Mhm.
but let me first report out, I think it would be, end with the feasibility study, but kind of as a prelude to that, take you through a scenario of where we are and what has been happening, and I know that many of you are aware of it because of the positions that you hold in your professional careers. But we have been receiving a myriad of information from Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Much of this, I think, has been passed on to you or is either in your packet this evening. One of the first documents that we received and that you also received a copy of was the June 25th document from the Commissioner. That document provides certainly, I think, his overall sentiment, both as the Commissioner and certainly as the educational leader in the state of Massachusetts with respect to what both the medical experts who are on the committees that he has put together to advise him with respect to the opening, their best opinion, their best advice medically and certainly professionally around what the goal is for the fall. And the goal for us in Massachusetts is to try to return to in-person learning as many students as we can. With that said, certainly there's the need to understand that things can change on a dime with the medical community and with what's going on in the trajectory of the virus, but also we need to recognize that this could look very different from district to district. One size doesn't fit all. And because one conducts a feasibility study and the results of the feasibility study indicate a certain preference, or if you will, the fact that one might be able to accommodate all students, you need to really look at the bigger picture to see whether or not you think that that's the appropriate thing to do given all of the parameters that go along with that. So with that said, there were many documents that came out, documents beyond the 25th, that gave us, have been giving us more and more insight into what guidance DESE is providing for us. The most recent one coming out on the 15th, which gave us the deadlines for the templates and the deadlines for the proposed plans for reopening in the fall. So having said that, we had to work backwards a little bit, given the fact that we had a series of meetings planned. Your packet shows you the various committees that have been formed, and the timeline that we had was a little bit different, so we needed to readjust that timeline, and I believe you have now a new schedule. The reason why I needed to move your school committee meeting from August 10th to August 3rd. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is requiring that we submit to them a preliminary report by July 31st that indicates what model or models we are leaning toward as a district. We'll provide some initial information. Part of that information includes the findings from our feasibility study, as well as information on all of the models, all of the 3 models that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has requested of all school districts, regardless of which model you might select. And that's the InPerson Learning model with restrictions based on the safety guidelines that DESE has provided to us, the remote learning model, and then a hybrid model. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education did not dictate the type of hybrid model that school districts must use, and that does present, I think, some challenges, as we all recognize. So thus, a district such as ours, if we were to use a hybrid model, could do any variation of a hybrid model from week on, week off, or any variation of that to days on, days off. And a neighboring district could pick something very different. At this point in time, there doesn't appear to be any expectation that the ability to select the model will be something that will be taken from districts. And I probably have an opinion that might be a little different, thinking that I recognize the difficulty it may present and the challenges it may present. If you are a staff member in this district, you reside in another district, and their model is different. So to be very upfront with people, that is going to present a challenge, I think, to all districts. Secondly, the final copy of the template, the final product that we must submit to DESE is due on August 10th, which would have been the date for your school committee meeting. That template is not available per se for me to print out and look at right now, but certainly there are components of it that the committee will have to weigh in on. You'll start certainly this evening after I present the feasibility study with some questions, I'm sure, and some thoughts about what model you may think is something that we should move toward. But certainly you need to weigh in on the model before we send it off on the 10th. And it must also be released to the public on the 10th. So to those parents and family members who are out there, just know that you will know on the 10th what model Oxford Public Schools will be using as we begin our school year. Again, albeit that anything could happen between the time of August 10th and when we reopen. Also, I would anticipate that on August 3rd, that meeting will present to you a calendar. I know that the committee has been looking at revising the school calendar. I think we'll be better prepared and poised to be able to do that. We are still waiting to see whether the commissioner is looking to modify the school year. There has been some talk that the school year might change from 180 days to 177. The critical component for all school districts is the preparation time that needs to happen in advance of any model happening in the fall. No matter what model you use, this is not opening the school year as in the past, and there will be a myriad of changes. So we have typically in this district 2 days before the beginning of the school year. You will see that I'm going to propose that we change that, and if we do not have any relief from the commissioner, that we take our 2 professional development days, the one in November and the one in March, and move those so that we have a minimum of 4 days at the beginning of the school year to do all of the trainings, all of the review of safety protocols, allow our staff to be able to do some rethinking of what teaching and learning will look like, what their classrooms look like, if we do in-person learning in whatever format. And there's a need to really build in more days than that, but that's the minimum that we have because our staff work 184 days. So that is at least a piece of that. I also would share this evening, and I've spoken with the chair a little bit about this in some preliminary conversations. no matter what model this district moves toward, I don't think that it would behoove us to begin school for anyone before Labor Day. There's the potential, particularly for students. We may be able to do some of the training before Labor Day for our staff, but a lot of that is contingent on some of the equipment and supplies and things that we need to order and get in, as well as some of the decisions that we're making about changes that are going to take time to do. None of this, as you know, is easy. Every solution you have brings another problem. So we have started lots of meetings. People in this room right now either chair a committee or on a committee and have already shared information. We have a host of meetings coming up, both live and remote, and we will constantly be fine-tuning once we make a determination as to the model. I want to make a comment, though, about some information that is out there, and this is my very personal concern. I have watched, as we all have, the way the state of Massachusetts has done a pretty remarkable job in phasing in their reopening. Through every step and every piece of and part of a step in that process and stage, it's been very thoughtful. They've taken time between to go back and reflect, to look at whether or not something is working, to look at the medical data before they've made decisions to either move forward with the next phase or not. I find it very difficult to believe that those who are leading this state would not think that that model would not be the model that school districts should use. A phased-in approach, whatever that looks like, to think that we can flip the switch, and particularly flip the switch and bring all students back in, to me, is extremely frightening as the interim superintendent, concerning about all of the logistics that need to happen, and quite frankly, doesn't fit any manner, shape, or form that the state of Massachusetts has used. I don't care what that model looks like. I think there are all kinds of, but to think that we should, on whatever day it is, bring in everybody after all of the changes that we have to make just to make it happen. And remember, none of us have lived through any of these changes. This has never been school the way we know it. And to think that we're going to be ready to go and we're going to have all of our students in, 1,570 plus students in, and do that is to me ludicrous. The state didn't do that. Why would you think that would be good for our students, our staff, our parents and families? And in fact, if you look at the survey question that we asked parents, would you like a phased-in model? We asked our staff a similar question. 86% of them, I think, responded that they would. Whatever that looks like. We gave them an example. It doesn't have to be the example we used. But it is something that I think is extremely troubling. I continue to lose sleep when I think about all of the checklist that goes on and on of things, that some of which we control and others that we do not. One being that we have no idea really where the cost will be. We have no idea what it will cost us should we make a decision to reopen and have in-person learning for all students. So there are so many areas for us to consider in addition to simply saying, yes, we have the space to do it. I think that's only one piece of it. The number one priority is it safe? Is it healthy? Is it the right thing to do for all of our students and staff? Or should we look at something a little bit different? Not saying that you're not ever going to get to where you need to go, but why should we think we should do something that the state of Massachusetts never did for its citizens? And that's what I think that I'm losing sleep over, quite frankly. So let me stop there. All of you certainly, as being very involved in this, have had the opportunity to respond to our survey. Our survey went out to parents and faculty last week, all faculty, all staff. It went out last Wednesday, and as of Thursday, I think we had 867 parents or families who responded. We have 1,137 parents or families, and as of today, we were 100 short. So we've had great response. I can share a little bit of that with you if you'd like later on this evening. But the majority of our parents certainly want some type of in-person learning if they can. There is certainly a preference to bring students back. However, when we ask the specific question about what model would you like to see, do you want remote learning? Would you like a hybrid? Or would you like in-person? It was interesting that although people want to send their children back to in-person, over 80%, we didn't get 80% for in-person when we were giving the 3 different scenarios. We got about a 50+% combination of almost, I think, 70% or so, a little under 78 or 79%, either for in-person or hybrid. And I wondered why that might be the case, but as I thought more about it, hybrid contains some in-person learning, and as such, I think many parents are cautious. And so they're thinking, let's try a little of this, see how it works, see how it fits. It's kind of like, putting your toe in the ocean or putting your whole foot in to begin with. So I think that's something that we need to think about. So having said that, I will walk you through the feasibility study.
Questions for Dr. Nash?
Yes.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions, Dr. Nash. One thing that you had said,
the 3 plans that need to go to DESI by the 31st.
Yes.
And I thought I heard you say that we are supposed to give a way that we're leaning towards. Did I hear you say that
Yes,
correctly?
we're
'Cause that's
supposed
not what
to-
I've read.
We're supposed to indicate in one of the questions, they ask us to indicate a preferred model at that point in time.
So they're asking us to submit the 3, make a decision by the 10th, but they want to know our
The
preferred model.
Yes.
Could you
yes.
just point me to where you see
Sure.
that language?
So it, actually, it's on page 1. It's the document that they put out on July 15th, where they talk about the 2 steps, step 1 and step 2. So the first document is a preliminary reopening plan summary. All right, so you can change, obviously. It includes, as part of that model, it includes your key findings, and then it says, please select the predominant model for your elementary, middle, and high school. So they're looking for the predominant model that you would be, in other words, the model you're leaning toward, on page 3. And that's part of the plan that's due on July 31st. It's right under the contact information. What are your key findings in your feasibility study? And then they're probably making an assumption that based on that, you're going to make a recommendation. So you're to select which model is more predominant, right? And then you can explain on the next section, if you'd like to explain why, and that would probably be if you did not choose to do an in-person learning model, even though you had the space to do it, you would want to explain there, here's the reasons why we would not do that at this point. And then you have to give a summary of all the other models. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I didn't.
Well, I was looking for that too, because, depending on, you would, obviously, let's suppose that you checked off, we're going to do in-person for this grade or this group, but not this. You certainly are going to explain that. The question I think that I have is, what feedback is DESI going to tell you if you were to say, we have the space to do this? If you look at our feasibility study and we have the space, we choose not to move in the direction of total in-person at this point in time. I'm wondering what feedback we're going to get on that. There are some districts, as you know, who have already made up their mind prior to all of this coming out and have made a decision as to what they're doing next year. So I do not know what the response is going to be, how fast it's going to be, but obviously it has to be pretty fast because we have to submit the next one within a week or so. So I do have the results of the survey, I did find them, but we certainly will make them available to you if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep. So I do have them, actually they're hot off the press. I can spend a little bit of time, if you'd like, just talking about them, and then we can send them off to you so you can see. But we did receive 1,030 responses from our parents or guardians, so we were a little over 100 or so short of the total number. We asked parents particularly if they had a plan. We asked them the questions, as you know, what grade, they had to fill this out for every student, what grade were they going to be in? Did you plan on sending your child back to school if we had in-person learning? We didn't specify whether it was hybrid, we simply said in-person, we didn't say anything else. That's where we got 82.5% said yes, they did plan on sending their children back or their child back. We also asked them about transportation, and we asked them, of all the 3 learning models, which ones did you prefer? We defined each for them. 53.9% said they preferred the in-person with the safety restriction that were in place. 24.4% indicated the hybrid model, and 16.6% said remote. But if you take the combination of the 24.4 and 53.9, that's about 78%, which is more in line with people saying, I want to send my child back. I'm just not sure if I want it every day, full 5 days a week, or I want to do some kind of hybrid. Our staff was pretty well split too. We also asked about a phased-in approach, and 69% of our parents said they would prefer a phased-in model. Now, we did give them an example so they at least knew what a phased-in meant. If they were voting for that one in particular, then it could have influenced, how they voted. So I certainly would think there would probably be a little bit of change in that number. And then when we asked which hybrid model they would prefer, we gave them 2 choices. We didn't narrow it down and say, do you want a hybrid that's A-B, Tuesday, Thursdays, or anything like that? We said days on, days off, week on, week off. And 52.9% of our parents surprisingly said week on, week off, which we thought, I think, based on some of the research I know that Amy and her group have been doing, doesn't seem to support what most people would say. And 35.1% said just the opposite, obviously, days on. So we also did we did a similar survey, but not exactly the same for our staff. So we got some really good information that we can use and that our teaching and learning team can use. We have a really short window of turnaround for us to make some decisions. I have a meeting set up this week also with the Board of Health. If this evening there are some leanings as to what the school committee would like me to continue to look at with respect to a model, I certainly want to be able to share that with our Board of Health this week to ensure that they're on the same page as we are before we do anything and as to writing it and submitting a preliminary, which again, I believe can change between that time and the time that we come back to you with the final. So the feasibility study is pretty black and white, pretty clear for you. We spent, business manager and I spent an entire, I think a day in each building, almost a day, in each building with the principals, the assistant principals, looking at did we have the space? If we were to bring students back for in-person learning based on the guidelines for 3 feet minimum distance allowed from seat edge to seat edge, would we have the space to do that? And they are all here this evening and can certainly talk to you about some of the challenges, particularly in some buildings where we knew that we needed to remove non-essential furniture, where there's a lot of furniture in a lot of elementary classrooms for obvious reasons, and looking at the space ranges and what we could do. So I provided for you in the packet. I categorized it by looking at what are the ranges of our classrooms in the different schools and different grades, or either wings or corridors, depending on the school. Showed you the projected class sizes for next year. And then based on the students per room and based on the DESE guidelines of 3 feet distancing requirements minimum, showed you the number of desks that we could, and chairs. These are single desk and chairs, or they're either joined desk and chairs. There are no tables. So we're not putting a table for a person. We've removed those in some of the rooms where we had what I would call either single student tables or in some instances, 2 student tables. So these are single desk and chair are attached in all of our rooms. So we've shown you that in Chafee, for example, you can see the room ranges in preschool, pretty large, kindergarten, 828 to 858, and grade 1 on average, 726 square feet. The number of students, one of the things that has certainly helped us or aided us, particularly this year, is the fact that our class sizes tend to be not where they were maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. They are certainly less than what you might have had in 3 or 4 years past. So with class sizes in preschool and kindergarten of 15 to 18 and grade 1 of 20 to 21, we can accommodate the number of students. If we were to do any type of in-person learning, we could accommodate. Certainly if we were going to do full in-person learning, meaning bringing everybody back all at once. There were some.
Can I stop?
Sure.
I was trying to do a little research on this, and maybe somebody out in the audience knows more than I do. But I was looking up the phases that we're doing in the state, and I totally agree with what you're talking about, Dr. Nash. We should have a phased-in approach too, because this model seems to be working for us in the state. But it said, under the updated gatherings order, indoor gatherings are limited to 8 people per 1,000 square feet, but should not exceed 25 people in a single enclosed indoor space. So when I read that first line, and I look at all the great work you guys have done, you know, some of those rooms are less than 1,000 square feet. There's, in this, at least phase 3 opening, and I could be reading it wrong, but it says 8 people per 1,000 square feet, and we're gonna be putting 20, you know, potentially 20-something kids in a classroom. And I know it says you can't have more than 25 in a single enclosed indoor space,
Right.
but that doesn't,
So
it
I
doesn't
think you're
specify
reading
square
the
feet.
state guidelines.
Correct.
Right, and these were developed differently from the state guidelines based on the medical information regarding students and student transmission of COVID.
Correct.
That's how I understand it.
correct.
So
And
there is the variance, as you're pointing out, between.
So to back to your point, I mean, I have a lot of trouble when we're asked to do, to try to get everybody back in safely, and we're stepping away from the guidelines that have worked for the state that the state is proposing. And I still can't understand how, when we basically, since March 13th, kids were they were in their houses. They weren't out. They weren't out and about. They weren't anywhere. So I've been looking and trying to do research on where is this data coming from that that kids aren't as susceptible. They were home. They weren't going to Walmarts or grocery stores to get items. They were home. They were isolated. So that's another thing that bothers me, is I keep hearing that they're not as susceptible. The data's showing that. Well, sure, I'd love to see some of that data.
Actually, Mr. Canacchioli, the latest data is showing one of the highest cases right now is in Revere, and they're blaming it on the teenage crowd at the beach.
Right, yeah.
They're blaming, it's that 16 to
think-
20-year-old crowd right now.
When I read, I think that came out in the June 25th guidance, that read for one of the first documents, I think, that came out with that information. I think they were alluding to a lot of international studies. I know that there are some medical experts who have some concerns because those studies are not large numbers, large populations. They're relatively small. Of course, they're new studies. Those countries like Denmark, Israel, forget some of the others, Finland or some of the others mentioned, had their rush, if you will, earlier, so therefore there was more data available. And also looking on, I would say, some of, but not a lot, of the information they have currently from the United States. In other words, what can they, assumptions based on the medical information can they make on what has happened in the United States? But I don't disagree with you. I'm not a medical expert, and all of us are relying on this information, but I do find that the guidelines, certainly for the state, with respect to groups and gatherings, were different. And again, I think their argument would be, and their FAQs and that, that was based on the fact that we're talking about mostly adults, and here we're talking specifically about children, and we've learned certain things about them. Whether we believe that's the case or not.
Children who have adults around them all day long.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just not children
Yeah,
in a
right.
school building.
Sure, absolutely.
So, I obviously have
Right.
some concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you all did great work, and I think all of us in our districts at some level, whether they're doing it, but I know we're doing it the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's major concerns with, for me, stepping away from the guidelines that have worked for this state. The state has done an amazing job, and for all the heat that the governor has taken at times, I think he's done a great job.
Mm-hmm.
And this phased-in approach is a great job, but for us to sway off with our youngest population in our state, and then to put some of our more vulnerable veteran potential teachers in harm's way as well, I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me when I read that little line there. So I just wanted to at least throw that out
Yep.
as you continue to give your report, so
Yep.
thank you.
So we have provided for you some also additional information of what we call, and you received this in your packet, an additional COVID cost list, COVID-related costs. So what I'm saying to you is also reflected on that sheet. We recognize that in some of our buildings, we need to remove anything that's a table and try and purchase, or obviously in some way, shape, or form, get desks there, and that's what we needed to do as we did our walkthroughs in Chafee, particularly looking also at some other areas. Art supplies, for example, we had the conversation about what we call essential art supplies, and how do you really ensure that those are sanitized, and can we expect that a kindergarten student or grade 1 student could do that sufficiently, and do we even want that child to be doing that? So would it mean that we would go out and purchase some additional student individual art supplies for them to either take to the classroom or for the teacher to bring, so that each student has his or her own? Again, this is an additional cost. We don't have any idea right now as to what that might look like. We have gone ahead and ordered touchless hand sanitizers for every single classroom. I don't know the status on those. Justin might be able to update you as to whether those will even be in on time, and then it's a matter of mounting all of them. We also, as you know, recognize that there's a recall on something like 50-plus sanitizing products as a result of toxic, I think, methanol that's in it. So hopefully it's not one of our products. However, I can tell you that on the listserv, a superintendent in the South Shore said I was trying to be proactive, and I ordered all of this, and guess what? It's all on the list for recall. So as I said, as soon as you think you've gotten to the next step of the level and found a solution, there's another problem right around the corner that you have to think about. We talked about the need to have additional staffing. One of the requirements, as you know, is that students must eat lunch in the cafeteria. To that end, Justin and I have begun meetings with our food services director to talk about how preparation might look different, how deployment of staff might look different. We're certainly in a district that does things a little differently than most districts. Whoops, not waving, I'm hitting a fly or something.
Just for clarification, you said students would be eating in the cafeteria?
Excuse me, let me clarify
Okay,
that. I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
thank you for
No,
saying.
that's-
Yeah, students could eat in the cafeteria if it's 6 feet, and of course we have supervision. But primarily they would be eating in the classrooms. I think some of us thought initially, until we got some clarification, that might look a little different than now how we recognize it would look. And that would be that in order for us to serve those students, if we were to have all students in in-person setting, in other words, class of 20, everyone's back, we would need to take probably half of that class and put them somewhere else to eat. Because as soon as you take your mask off, you need to be 6 feet. So that means supervision. And of course, in most school districts, as you know, teachers have duty-free lunch. So to that end, we recognize that not just in that area alone, but also if we need to double up our bus runs. So in our conversations last week, with our initial conversations with our transportation, we asked them to develop a cost and develop a proposal for what it would look like for us to do what DESE is requiring, which is a maximum of 24 students. They're not requiring the 24, but that's based on what our buses hold. To do the 3 feet, the max you can have on a bus is 24 students. So what we want to know is, and that's all students wearing a mask at all times. So what we want to know is, what's that going to look like? Because we're going to have to do double runs. A double run means that a student is picked up earlier, dropped off at a school earlier, potentially, stays on a bus longer, as you know. So we want to look at that and see what that's like. And that would be if you did full in-person learning. Obviously, if you did a hybrid model, then you've reduced that because it's alternating days or alternating weeks, and your numbers is pretty much, cut in half. So we do not have numbers yet. We certainly have concerns about that cost. We also believe strongly that we need to have monitors on the bus. How do we ensure, when you're a bus driver, we can't ask you to make sure that every student has a mask. We can't ask you to make sure, even if they have an assigned seat, that they're sitting in their assigned seat. But how do we then ensure that that's happening? We can hire bus driver monitors ourselves. In the past, you have used Durham, and they have hired them. And that cost us approximately $26,000 to $28,000 per monitor, Justin?
That's right, 28,000.
So if we had 10 buses, that's $280,000 just for that. But let me go back to what a position that all of the principals and I have talked about that there's a strong need for. We talk about the supervision. How do we minimize the challenges that we're going to have when we do any type of in-person learning, so that students stay in cohort groups? Certainly we can do that more easily at the elementary level because they are with classes. But when students at the elementary level go to the boys or girls room, they're often unattended. How do we make sure that they're socially distant? How do we make sure that they wash their hands? How do we make sure after that time that the next class that goes in, all of the high-touch areas in that bathroom have been wiped down when we know we only really have one day custodian in every building? So I created a position called Health and Safety and School Operations Monitors. And by our count, with a job description that I shared last week with the Ad Council, we would need upwards of 22. So multiply at $13 an hour times 19.5 hours, because we want to keep them under the benefits requirement. And I think we were up to $180-something thousand. That's a must. That's a high priority for us, along with how transportation needs to look. We need people. When kids get off in the morning, and typically at the middle school in the past, they could just sit in a long hallway. We need someone to ensure that they're not going to sit closer than they should. What happens if they're dropped off earlier? What happens after school with kids who are waiting for things to happen? How do we ensure, again, the distancing? We can't ask, well, staff could do that. It's not their primary job. We only have a limited number of administrators. So we really need, for me to feel comfortable at least, to begin to say to the public, we can cover some of these items. We've got to have these positions. It's a no-brainer.
These positions that you're asking for, is this contingent on a full reentry?
We based it on a full reentry initially, but when I started to look at even a hybrid model, we might be able to reduce it by a few. But we were also thinking about, and troubled, at least I was, and I know the principals certainly were, given the fact that now if we were doing a full in-person, and let's say we had a class of 20 at lunch, we would have 10 in and 10 out. How does one person, because we were thinking that a monitor could be between 2 classrooms to monitor lunch, how do they now do both? So a hybrid model provides a little bit more wiggle room for that. But we do know that we're going to need some additional support for custodians. I'm not asking them, these are not custodians, but certainly if some of their supervision involves students getting off of a bus or walking into a classroom, they could certainly have the wipes or something to do some of those high-touch areas that they're supervising without really getting into what our custodians do as part of their just general job descriptions and, yeah.
So, Mr. Coonan?
Yes, please.
So, have we surveyed our custodians and staff, and do we know, are we gonna have, if we do reopen,
Yes. we have.
everybody kinda, no, I know we have, but the
Yes.
question is, are they going, have we surveyed them with the question, are they all gonna return
We did. That was the first question we asked them.
for the custodians?
We asked all of our staff
Okay.
to respond. So the survey to staff went out to everybody. I think we received 167 responses back to date. And when we asked that question, I think it was the first question, we said if school reopens in the fall for in-person learning, we didn't define which form, please check below if you do not plan to return to work. And we had 3 people who indicated they did not plan to return to work due to COVID related. So,
I guess my initial fear is people are gonna be hesitant to say that they're not gonna return to work.
sure,
Nobody wants to say, okay,
Sure.
then you're gonna be replaced.
right, sure.
And I kinda anticipate that we might lose a lot of people once they know that this is really happening, if it is
Sure.
happening.
Sure.
And,
Most definitely, and that's why certainly once a determination is made as to what type of a model, I would think that if you look at the survey for staff, it was pretty split. It was interesting because it wasn't as apparent as a parent survey with respect to what model you preferred as a staff member. It was almost as if 16% had no preference at all as to what model, and I think it was pretty split between 28% preferred hybrid, 25% remote learning, and 29.9% in person. So it's interesting that we didn't get a real definitive, desire for one form or the other. So it could also be really linked to the person and their role that they have in the school district also. But
and I think that the other compounding factor is families. A lot of our staff
Sure.
probably have
sure,
young children themselves, and like you mentioned before, having so many different potential hybrid models happening. I see that as just being a huge
This
wrench
is
in the
a-
problem.
reopening for the fall for a school district in Massachusetts and in every state is an ever-moving target. Everything and anything could change in a heartbeat. We may all plan to, or desire, or make certain determinations, and then we could easily have a resurgence, early in the fall. Or you could, if you looked at the document that came out over the weekend, the 19-page document about responding to the different protocols and scenarios, which I think you might have gotten a copy of too, that I might send off to you, not sure. It clearly indicates that should you have multiple cases in your buildings, you contact the Board of Health, then you call DESE and make some determination. So you could see this kind of yo-yo effect of, a community that has a resurgence in its community, and then all of a sudden it happens in your classrooms, or it happens in another community but is brought in by the people who work there, and then you close down that school. Or you could see, as they say, a number of individuals who you send home because, they're symptomatic, or they are COVID positive, and, so it's a revolving door. A classroom, unfortunately, this year is going to look extremely different. We're going to be extremely flexible in whatever model with attendance, thinking about what that's going to look like, both with our staff and our students, because we know that there are going to be times when people are going to, don't feel well, and we're telling you. Whereas we used to drag ourselves in, everybody in this room remembers a time when they should have stayed home. They dragged themselves in because they were giving a test, or they didn't want to miss something. And now we're going to tell you just the opposite. We're going to, don't feel guilty. We want you to stay home. If you feel ill, stay home. Most school districts struggle for substitutes during the course of the year. And as spring comes on, it's awful. because everybody has decided we're done. In the winter, they'll work for you, but I can envision the difficulty that we may have doing that. So those are just some of the small outlier issues that I think every school district and every superintendent and every administrator and every teacher and every family is probably thinking about. Maybe families not to the degree that we are because it's our job, but they certainly are concerned in the same way that I am and that everybody in this room is. So I can walk you through this, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory on the feasibility study. We tried to be as clear as possible. The bottom line for you is this. If I were to make a determination just on space, then I certainly have to say to Desi, here's our numbers. We can fit our students in. We have some additional spaces, as you know, in some of our buildings. The building that was the tightest one for us was Barton School. However, we have one class that is a third grade, and I'm trying to remember who it is, but that room probably could fit 21 desks. But all of our others, based on our numbers, projected numbers, and based on the fact that there will be some people certainly not sending their students at least right away, or they will choose to do our remote learning academy, period, for the entire year, those numbers will probably go down, not up, I would think. So we know we have the space. The question is it the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to do based on all of the challenges, based on what we know has been effective from a state perspective? I am troubled that the commissioner did not think that he rejected actually the proposal that MTA put forward, which was a specific phased-in model. Even if you didn't like what they put forward, why would you not think that a phased-in model would make sense after the longest period of time, stretch of time, that students and faculty in the state of Massachusetts have not been in a school? 5 months.
Has there been push by MASS, like MTA, for, I mean, you are the leaders across the Commonwealth. Could you speak up to the commissioner?
I think they
and
have.
say,
Last week, the executive board of my organization met with the commissioner, echoed some of their concerns. I certainly have the biggest overarching concern for me is really, should we do this? Is it the best thing for everyone to come back? And I would tell you, no.
Right.
It's not. 100% is not. I can't sleep at night thinking about it. I have serious reservations. There are so many reasons why it doesn't make sense to start that way. It's not that you're never going to get there, but let's look at it and let's take it slow. Let's put a toe in, a couple of toes in. Let's see how it goes. Let's evaluate. Let's look at a very different model of phasing in. I am going to be talking about that tomorrow with the Full Ed Council, what that might look like. But certainly moving toward, hopefully, back to more of a full robust in-person learning, but at a later time in the school year, potentially. I don't know where my group overall stands. I think that as we have to move forward to submit our preliminary plans and then final plans, even before that, I would think that there would be chatter on our listserv about what are you doing?
Right.
And I haven't heard that yet. I saw the questions they asked about funding and about staffing and all of that, but I was surprised that there hasn't been a strong stance to say no. Now, having said that, once the 31st passes and DESE has all of this information from the 351 school districts and looks, don't you think that that's the time when they're going to say, whoa, wait a minute. The majority of our districts have said they're not doing this. So I do think that this is a process. Unfortunately, the process is a slow one. And I do think that it could be a time at which, at the end of that first step, that the commissioner would go back to the governor and those in power and say, if you want anything to happen different than what they're telling me, this needs to happen. We easily will spend all of our resources, and that would be prioritizing them, not getting everything that's on that list, doing what is a high priority, high need around transportation, PPE equipment, our transportation for SPED and regular ed, PPE equipment, technology, staffing, our staffing needs. We could easily spend all the money we have. As you know, there are two pools of money. One is the Title I money portion, as through the Title I formula, I should say. That's about $377,000. And that's the initial money. The new money that came about at $225 per student, if you used 570 students as the number, that would bring in another, say, $350. So we have about $730,000 of what I call COVID money, one-time money to use to do the kinds of things. But if it's going to cost you 200 plus for monitors, 180 for your bus monitors and your other monitors, another 100 plus, and then you have technology needs around 100,000, and then you have a bus transportation cost that we don't even know what those are going to be yet. You've easily spent that. So even if you thought you should open, do you have the funding to do it the way that it needs to be done, to at least say, we've done put the necessary steps in place, who knows, but at least we can say, we've got these things covered. So,
Dr. Nash, I just want to add one thing to that
Sure.
as well, too. When you talk about the bus monitors, or your coordinators with the health and safety within the school, there's no guarantee that you're going to find people to fill those jobs.
thank you for saying that. That is
There-
something.
And then also the equipment, there's no guarantee it's going to
Right,
come in.
right. You're exactly right. If we're looking for 20 people to come in for $13 an hour to do, are we going to even find them? So how do I sit here? So whatever model, any type of in-person learning, whether it's hybrid or all students coming in, is going to take some additional staffing to do it the way it needs to be done. We cannot think that all of our staff are going to be able to spend their time out of their classrooms monitoring, otherwise we'll pay lip service to it. We'll tell our parents we're doing it, but we really aren't doing that.
And then secondly, Dr. Nash, you talked about this online academy.
Mm-hmm.
Who would that be staffed by? Would we have to hire additional staff for that?
Well, I think it's dependent on, I look at the Remote Learning Academy for a group of students whose parents either are compromised or have a relative or someone in their family, a student who has immune suppressed system that would not allow them to come, or let's say someone where a parent just simply says, ooh, I just can't. Remote Learning Academy, if we were to do that, is going to be more self-directed. It's not the same as what we saw in the spring, where all staff were working in a regular setting. So I would envision that to look different than a hybrid model of remote learning. So it's really two kind of nuances of remote learning. One for those who just choose not to come for those reasons I articulated, and then the one that's part of hybrid would look very different. So that kind of is two different types. One's more self-directed, where we would probably have distance learning platforms, where we would specify that there would be staff available, but it may not be your classroom teacher, because you've decided not to take part in any kind of in-person learning. And so we may not have your teacher to help you, but we'll have someone who will check in with you, who will ensure this is happening, but it's really more self-directed. Yeah, that's what a lot of school districts are doing, should you choose to go in that, because they don't have staff and they don't have the money to hire staff. Now, having said that, if we were to have some staff who have some COVID-related reasons that would fit under the federal laws, we could use them. But remember that those guidelines right now and that law runs out December 31st, 2020. So unless they renew it, anyone who might be one of those staff members who could potentially oversee that aspect, we would only really have them in place for half of the school year, unless the government renews that.
Mr. Cooney?
Yes.
So I think Natick Public Schools, and I could be misspeaking, contracted with somebody to do remote learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some other districts are doing that, and I don't necessarily, I have mixed emotions about the whole thing because I feel like I want our teachers to teach our children and not some separate person. And I think about special ed and I think about services and delivery of things. And if you have a different organization taking a cohort of your students away because they're online, it gives me just uncomfortable feelings. But I know some districts are going that way. I kind of feel like we're going to be pushed into a cohort model if we want it or don't want it, just because I think the 3 feet with kids packed into a classroom is just, it's too tight. I already feel like they're 3 feet apart. I mean, honestly, forever, I feel like the kids' desks have been that close. And we're talking like their torso to another student's torso, correct?
When you look at the spacing in the
seat,
pictures,
which is like,
in some instances where the
They can
rooms are
touch each
bigger,
other.
we've got a little bit more than 3 feet because the desks are smaller.
right.
But in other, the desks are larger, so when you actually measure from seat to seat, the distance is a little bit more, but it's certainly not 6 feet.
Right,
There's
and
no
I
question.
just, I feel like that's uncomfortable, so I've heard some districts saying, okay, we're gonna cut the student population in half, and they're gonna come on certain days and whatnot. I've heard things like the windows have to be open at all times in schools. I don't know if that's
So-
a mandate, or if that's
No,
just
that's a recommendation to
recommendation,
keep
okay.
doors open and windows open as much as possible. Also to ensure your ventilation system is working and appropriate.
And I've heard the opposite, like I know we've had times where we've had presentations about different buildings, and Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's this school per se, but you know, the ventilation system doesn't work well if you open all the windows, you know, and your heating has problems, and what's our heating bill gonna be? Like, I'm thinking of all these, like you said, you take one step
Every-
forward, you take 2 steps
Sure.
back.
Sure.
I'm thinking if we have the cohort model, our AP students, right, at the high school, if we have students that are supposed to be kind of like, we're gonna probably try to track them in some way to keep them segregated and together so they don't infect each other. How do you say no to some kids and yes to other kids, because we're probably not gonna be able to have all those offerings for those.
Sure. I think there are lots of things that we'll need to look at
Right.
to be prepared for whatever model we have that has any variation of students in classrooms, whether it's full or whether, meaning all students, or whether it's partial, meaning a hybrid model. So I think certainly restricting mobility looks very different in each school. By default, it happens more easily at the elementary schools and at middle because you team. At the high school, I think the challenge is more difficult. So you have to look at the potential of changing your schedule at least for a year. So if you currently have a block schedule, then you don't have mobility or passing but 3 times as opposed to a 7-period day where they pass 6 times. So, and you also have then that potential that they're moving in halls. So you're gonna have to look at that.
Right.
That's something that Dave and I have been discussing. That's something that, again, would be have to be bargained. One of the things that we want to recognize is, above all of this, is any change in working condition, no matter what model, needs to be discussed because you have a contract. The contract specifies certain types of things, like a work day, work hours, and all of that. So any kind of change in really working conditions, that you're going to do on a permanent basis, meaning for a school year, would need to be bargained. I mean, when we flipped the switch and the state closed down, that was an extraordinary circumstance. It was an emergency, and so I think in that respect, it was a little bit easier to sit at the table and have those discussions with unions. But that doesn't seem to be the case right now. So I think it's going to be something, as I've indicated, that's more local. But that's another piece of the puzzle. So getting back to really bottom line, if you were to ask me, based on all of this, am I comfortable bringing all students back in person? My answer would be no, I'm not. I have all kinds of concerns and reservations about doing that. And I keep going back to how well this state has done. And we did it because it was a conscientious, phased-in approach with time to stop and pause and assess along the way. And to think that we would bring all our staff and students back and not think that there's any kind of emotional concerns, social emotional concerns that everybody would have, that we would just say, okay, tomorrow we start teaching, guess what? It makes no sense, you know. So I am going to propose something tomorrow and that we'll talk about at our ad council meeting. It is a phased-in approach. It really looks at providing some opportunity at the beginning of September, if that were the case, for our staff. I don't believe it's enough time, but it's all that I have right now, and that's to use the 4 days. And then in the following week, not to bring in and start teaching, but let's deal with bringing in small groups of students and families, let them understand what this is going to look like. Have teachers have time with kids, maybe the students they had last year. Similar to what I think MTA talked about, it's not the teaching begins, again, that second week, but we phase in. We have an opportunity to have the conversations with those little kids and their family members who come in and explain to them how things are changing and why they're going to be wearing masks and why lunch is going to be served in their classroom and why the corridors have marks on them. And why, for example, you're going to take passing time at the high school, and guess what? When the bell rings, you're not all going to go out at once. You know, and why maybe sports won't begin right away, and why clubs are going to look different. Those are questions that everyone wants answered. And I don't think you can just do that in one parent night. I think it's important to bring people in small groups in that second week. And maybe after then, people will feel a little better about whatever model you're using, particularly if you use a hybrid, and then we'll start to be able to phase in people and do some, maybe some reteaching. We don't know yet, but what I'm saying is that you take the first entire term and let's live with a model that doesn't bring every kid back. Let's do a hybrid. Let's see and make adjustments if we can. Let's look and evaluate the data at the end of that term and see where we are. Who knows? Could be that somewhere along the line we get a resurgence and they close it down. But maybe by the end of the first term, things might be going well. And maybe then we could phase in some more students or all of the students. We don't know. But in other words, something that isn't going to be whatever model, we just don't plop it down and go, this is it. Go to town, everybody. I think we need to be thoughtful, and you know, we need to have a lot of conversations with all of our stakeholders, the administrators, the unions, to talk about what that should really look like. So, but I don't believe that I can support here this evening bringing all students back, no matter when we bring them back. So I'll end at that.
All right, I guess at this stage, September, that I will entertain a motion to give for school committee backing or direction of school committee for Dr. Nash's approach. September, go ahead.
So you had said earlier that Commissioner Riley had already declined the MTA's
Yes.
thoughtful letter. What if, let's say that's what the town of Oxford decides to do, and Riley still says no? Then what do we do?
That's an interesting question. I thought about that because I wondered how we would all, as we all send our templates back off, what information that's going to tell, you know, as to how we're going to respond or phase in. I mean, there are people certainly talking, I'm sure, about a hybrid model where they bring in certain grades at a time or certain buildings at a time. I can't imagine, I don't know. The answer is I don't know what the commissioner's response is going to be. Because again, I haven't really heard from that many of my colleagues as to what they're doing. I think everybody's just really digesting this now because we just completed our feasibility studies and now we've got to turn around and make some decisions, hopefully. And I think this is what a lot of superintendents, not just myself, are dealing with. Certainly some have made decisions earlier based on what they already knew. I mean, Lexington's decision, a lot of it was based on an early survey they did where most of their parents preferred either in-person, part in-person or remote, but also with the fact that they do have severe overcrowding in their high school. So they just knew they couldn't do it. So she got that out earlier, well beyond, well before, you know, any guidance. So I don't know the answer to that. You know,
But he has the be-all, end-all, correct?
I would say he does as the commissioner, certainly. Yes. Okay. Yes. As far as that goes, he can order, just as he can reduce 180 days. With some of the decisions are covered by Mass General law, so he would have to go back to the legislature to make that decision, to allow him to do that. Others he can make, and I'm not sure which, but, so, yes, could be. We could also see the MTA, the AFT, and the Boston Teachers Union, the three big groups, taking a stand and saying, so I don't think this is over.
Right.
So I think we're moving forward, but then we may be moving back a little bit. We may move forward. But I, just need to express my real concern about trying to open school with everybody. I just know that that's not something I'm comfortable doing.
Thank you.
At this point, entertain a motion.
Just before the motion,
Go
Chair.
right ahead, sir, yeah.
Just for point of clarification, Dr. Nash, you will not be recommending fullback as your,
As my initial, as an opening in
On the-
September or whenever we open, I am not recommending that we move forward with an in-person learning model, meeting the DESE requirements. I think we need to look at one of the other two models. Yes.
right,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Okay,
And
yes.
Mr. Coonan, something to propose to this committee to think about. Should we write a resolution that basically says that we support the MTA, we back their recommendation, and we would like a phased-in approach? We could put that out as the school committee first here in Oxford, and we could share that with our fellow, school committee counterparts through the Commonwealth, and maybe we get on the same page with our unions that, are representing our teachers, and Commissioner Riley would understand that the school committees have the same feeling that it's not safe to bring our students back without a phased-in approach.
Could I
Just food
make a
for
comment?
thought. I don't know.
Mr. Cavalier.
Just a comment, I think Dr. Nash is already talking she's either brainstorming or has had conversations with her ad council that the hybrid model will kind of mirror what MTA has proposed. And there will be some phasing into it. So I think we can, or the district can create, it's not obviously going to be the same as the MTA template, but it certainly will have some of the overarching kind of goals of it.
So if
Sounds like that's what you were talking.
If I could just qualify or elaborate on that. I've had, I think this weekend, as I was starting to look at writing after the feasibility study, some of the preliminary comments to DESE and answering one of the questions as a follow-up, and I started to frame how I could answer that and all of the concerns I would have in trying to recognize that we have space, but I quite frankly ran out of bullets. I was bulleting so many things that I had to go back and recategorize these into large groups. And then I think it hit me. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to build something that really I can't build right now. That isn't going to work. So I've had initial conversations, but my thinking, I think, really kind of gelled more this weekend. And our meeting is tomorrow. I've shared some of it initially. I know I shared this with the MTA, making you the MTA president. I know you don't want that, Kimberly. With the OEA president, because we had a preliminary meeting this morning, we were talking about the phased-in model. Certainly I've talked about a phased-in model at my last ad council, but I haven't shared kind of the exact components of what potentially a phased-in for Oxford might look like with everyone here. I did this afternoon with Amy and Katie, because we were having a meeting of our teaching and learning committee, and we're discussing, what the different models might look like, because Amy is leading that with Katie, and so. But tomorrow we will go back to that and have the really full discussion and really talk about that a little bit more. So, but yes,
For clarification.
for clarification, I just wanted you to know that I haven't shared it with everybody yet.
Okay.
Because I wanted to wait till tomorrow, and I wanted to see where the committee stood primarily this evening on support or not of doing something a little bit different than what our study really tells us we can do.
So would Commissioner Riley come back and
I don't know.
say you can't? That's my only thing, so
We don't
do we
know, and
take
that's
an
the
initiative?
piece of it that, it's interesting because once these start going in, and we probably will get some feedback on them, I just don't know. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't submit that. I would say, fine, you want me to do this? You tell me I need to do it then, because I don't think it's the right thing.
So that's why I just kind of proposed that we would take a stand with your thoughts and share it with others that might have that same feeling, but not enough.
It would be
Courage.
interesting to see if MASC has taken any stand. Certainly, if my group takes a stand on this, it just, nothing that I've seen thus far indicates, one way or the other. I think, again, people are all trying to muck through this. It really is. We're all trying to and we really haven't come up for a lot of air to have those conversations. I was gonna send something out to the area supers central. In fact, I'll probably do that tomorrow just to see what they're doing. But I'm surprised that it hasn't already happened. So we'll see though, but I'd be interesting, conversation or at least a dialogue that happens via email.
Thank you. So I think our first approach as a committee is to stand behind Dr. Nash's plan. And then tonight, I'm going to ask for a motion to support Dr. Nash in a phased-in approach to return to school using a hybrid model with the start of school being after Labor Day.
And I think at this point, it's the start of school for students, but it may
For
also
students.
be for staff. I just don't know yet.
We can add students to
Yeah,
that, yes.
right. I mean,
that
I know
was the
students
intention of that.
definitely.
Because I think
Yeah.
it's part of that. Okay, I have a motion.
I was making that
So
motion.
motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Good
Moved in
discussion.
a second, discussion, yes.
So I thought we were just voting on the 3 plans that she's gonna approve forward to Desi. That she needs to get out at the end of the month. That language in your proposal sounded very specific, so I'm just a little curious of what we're voting for.
Well, right now, we're looking at not the specific plan, but support of Dr. Nash's phased-in approach. So the committee's saying, we could have 3 members of this committee that could turn around and say, that's great, Dr. Nash, we're going back to school. I want every kid in the seat to start school. And the school committee, we have every right to do that. We're gonna vote on the final plan. I think what we have to do tonight is we heard Dr. Nash's approach on her direction. And this will be taking support and giving her marching orders as school committee, yes, please explore in that direction. We can turn around, like I said, and we can deny this, and if 3 people turn around and say, something, we're not even bringing the kids back, it's all at home, all remote, we can do a pure hybrid, and we can have Dr. Nash roll that out, or we can say we want those 1,137 students in a seat the first day of school. Yes.
Just to be clear then, so what we're saying is, yes, Dr. Nash has to submit 3 proposals. She has to submit 3 plans. That's what she's been directed to do by the commissioner. But it is also in that language that she say, this is what I prefer, this is our preferred mode. So you're asking for a motion to say that as a school committee, we're saying the preferred mode is that hybrid option that is phased.
Exactly, but we're actually, in my motion now, we're supporting Dr. Nash in constructing the plan. We haven't seen the plan yet.
Okay. But she still would need to complete those 3.
Yes.
Yes, the requirement is that I
Yes, it's still
complete
that.
all. I certainly have to indicate a preference for a model for all of the levels, elementary, middle, and high school. What I'm really looking for is kind of your walking orders as to whether I think you want me to, now that you know, I can bring all students back from an area of space. Do you want me to move in that direction? Or do you want me to move in another direction, which could be hybrid, really, or remote? Those are the only 2 other directions right now that we have,
Right.
so.
Right, and you had talked about your phase.
A phased-in approach
Phased-in.
also is something that I strongly would recommend, no matter what approach we did, whether it's remote or hybrid, it would look a little different, but I still think it should be a phased-in approach, where you do something for a period of time, evaluate it at the end. It seems to make sense, since you have 4 terms, that you'd run it for a term. You do an assessment. You'd also know what the medical data is gonna say to you sometime in November, and whether we're gonna get that resurgence, and then you can make some decisions. Do you stay on this plan? Do you modify it? Maybe you even modify. If you run a hybrid, maybe you feel that maybe I need to modify this hybrid and move to another model of a hybrid or whatever. But yes, I'm looking to get, really walking orders, which says we don't want to bring all kids back, and we do want more of a phased-in approach, whatever that model happens to be. That's all.
Right, I think, through the chair, I think my big concern is remote learning is gonna be a big piece no matter what. I mean, we do have the 3 plans. I think the consensus, I could just be public with it. I am not in favor of everybody coming back in the building. That just does not work, doesn't make sense. So to me, the remote learning plan is a huge piece of this and what that looks like. So I know the phased-in approach in however we word the amendment, I mean, the motion. I want to make sure remote learning is a focus in there, because I do like a phased-in approach, but a phased-in approach is going to look a lot different at K1 as it is going to be at 11, 12. There's lots of capacity to have different looking phased-in approaches. So to me, the remote learning plan ties hugely into whatever we do within this phased-in approach. So I think what we're talking about is a hybrid model that is going to have some phased approach to it, essentially. But I
Yes.
want to hear the word remote learning, remote plans. That is going to be a huge, huge piece to this, because as you've indicated, we could do a hybrid, and then within a few weeks, we could all be remote.
So,
So
You're
that
right.
to me, that has to be a game changer. It's one of the things as a principal in my district I'm pushing, because I think we all did an amazing job. The world's got, all of our educational world got turned upside down on March 12th. And we had zero guidance, and we all kind of worked our way through it. But I think we have an opportunity now in September to do it, to look at what we did and make adjustments and changes to do it really, really good. So I would really love to hear from anybody who's on the educational side of these committees, is where are we with remote plans? Where are the discussions at? What do you need? What are you looking at? Is there money that we can get to support, some technology that you might need to buy, software?
so we've got 2 aspects of remote. One that I call the remote that's intertwined with hybrid, which may look a little different because teachers are really teaching. The other one is the remote where either the entire district is on remote because someone has flipped the switch again and closed down districts, or we have groups of students who simply are not coming back to school. Right, so there's almost different types of remote learning within that model. A hybrid model, as opposed to what I call the remote learning academy model, where kids elect not to come back, and then there's the model where you flip the switch and everyone goes to remote. So there's nuances of that, so I just want to make sure.
Right, but within your hybrid model, within your phased model, there's gonna be remote learning.
Yes,
going on.
there is. And
And
so that-
those kids aren't choosing not to come back to school.
Right,
They're just gonna
exactly,
be,
exactly.
so to me, what does that look like?
Exactly.
That is
So
the key.
that's something that we need to define, and we need to bargain. So those are all, that's exactly it. What does that look like? And then what would our academy look like? So parents would know, if we elect not to send our child back, we want to know that, what is that going to be? It is not going to be what remote was when we closed down the entire district. It can't be, because our staff are going to be working. They're going to be teaching in some manner, whether it's let's say hybrid, they're going to be teaching. So it's going to be more self-directed. But then what happens if we pull the switch and the governor closes the entire state again because of an resurgence, I should say, of COVID? And then we now are in a better place, I think, because if you do a hybrid model, you're doing a dual model where you've got some live and some remote. So you flip a switch, I now have done both. So I'm going to be a little bit better on this than I would be if I was just doing full in person and I had to flip the switch. It's just common sense. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, we're working on that. We are looking at some platforms for those who totally elect not to come back, I'm going to call it our academy. And then we'll have to talk about in our bargaining as to what the expectations are for remote learning for our staff if we did a hybrid model, as well as, what does in-person learning look like, which we already have obviously good ideas on that.
Mr. Coonan,
Yes.
so you said some platforms.
Yes.
Are you thinking of Canvas or like an LMS that the district would invest in, so our teachers have and our students have the same thing like across the board for?
Could be. We're also looking at some of our, some really directed software that is in math, English, or math, English, science, and history. particularly that if we can find something that is K-12, it makes it a little bit easier. If you have multiple students who are doing it, multiple children within your family, then when you start looking at it, it looks very similar. It's not, but we need to be very clear to parents that it is not going to be the same as what it was when everyone was out,
Right.
for a lot of reasons.
So, Mr. Coonan, if I may,
Please.
I'm very much in favor of doing the hybrid model. That's maybe with cohorts. It's not that I want it. Obviously, nobody wants what we're being forced into, but if we're going to be training our kids, like you said, Dr. Nash, and getting them used to a routine, they're familiar with, this is how we learn at home through technology, and this is how we learn in school. And if they're with us, I don't know, 1 week on or 1 week off, or so many days on in a week and so many days off in a week, then we can help them with troubleshooting things in person and going through with them in person so they can learn the technology. It's a nightmare.
Right.
It's not positive to have to go through this. There's going to be so many growing pains, but I kind of think that that's probably where most districts are going, just reading preliminary plans across the state.
Right.
It's hybrid all the way. I don't think anybody, unless like Lexington is forced with space. My only other fear is like with the remote learning academy or something like that, if a parent tries it out at home, gets so many weeks in and says to the district, I can't handle this with my child, they're not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming we have to take them back.
Of course we do.
How does that affect our cohort and our numbers? Are we gonna,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
so I'm like anticipating things like that.
Sure, and that could very well be. Or someone sees, let's say you do a hybrid model, and the comfort level that they didn't have to send their child back at the beginning of the school, at the end of term 1, they say, let's say you're still staying in a hybrid, they say, well, I feel better now, things seem to be working, I'm hearing good information, I like the way this is working, I'm gonna now send my child back. You obviously need to ensure that they can come back. It's not like you're doomed to this forever. If you pick this model and you're going to do remote learning academy, you got to stick with that for the year. No, they certainly can come back. We would probably advise them based on certain levels. It doesn't make sense to come back in the middle of a term at certain grade levels for these reasons, whereas it might be okay at other grade levels. But yeah, and someone who, for example, might be doing remote learning where we would be looking at initial courses that they can take, and we would be directing them to take an English and a math. We would want them to finish that, particularly at the secondary level, so that they could get credit for that. So those are things that we're going to have to spell out for parents so they can make informed decisions if they really want to participate in the remote learning academy.
Mm-hmm.
Remote learning within a hybrid model will look different, obviously, and so would remote learning if we flip the switch. I mean, then the question is, do we go to look at these platforms that we've used, But again, remember, our teachers, our staff are going to be at a very different point than we were last March, last April, last May. I mean, we're making some inroads in purchasing a Chromebook for every single student, so that now there's commonality across the district. Because before, this past year, we simply said, if you need one, we'll give you one. But now for a teacher to have all of her students, if it were totally remote, using a Chromebook is much easier to manage, from that perspective,
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
My last comment about this. So I know, Dr. Nash, we've had some discussions about the equitability factor. When I look at remote learning and I look at a parent who is a computer technology expert versus a parent who is not savvy in any way, who doesn't even, I get greatly concerned for that. And as I think about and look toward the future, let's say we have 40% of our kids choose the online academy, 60% of our kids are doing the hybrid. Eventually, these kids come back together. And are they at the same level? Do we then have to look at, okay, well, you were in the academy, so you're in this boat. For students doing the remote learning, and I know that you said it wouldn't look the same, but I just didn't feel like there was a lot of time for students to learn. When a school day for a student is supposed to be at least, say, 4 hours of learning between lunch and specials and whatnot, maybe more than that. I apologize if that's not enough. They're not getting that time.
Right.
So again, my concern being on the weeks that they're at home, is there some regression going on versus the weeks that they're in school? And is there a way, in my perfect world, the teacher is live and my children are sitting at home that week, but they're in the classroom with everybody else? That would be ideal, because then I know everybody, whether at home or in the classroom, are all getting the same information from the same teacher in the same manner. So again, I just am so concerned about equitability for students.
So let me just go back a little bit and say that if someone elected not to send their child to school and therefore was not going to homeschool, but would participate in our remote learning academy, you know, our teachers, and let's say that we were engaging in a hybrid model, we weren't doing remote for all students, which would therefore negate the need for a remote learning academy. You're not going to have the ability to have potentially the classroom teacher or even a teacher of that student in that subject area check in on them on a daily maybe on a daily basis, but not to teach a lesson. It's going to be self-directed. We need to find the appropriate software to do that for us to use. We need to be able to specify that the expectation is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. you will be on doing your learning in math, science, English, history, whatever it is that we say are the components for you for that grade. Again, but a lot of it is self-directed, so you're right, but it can't be the equivalent if you have your staff teaching hybrid, because your staff are already teaching. So the only staff we could potentially pull would be those that would be free for a variety of reasons. So that's why we need to be very clear, up front and be honest. There isn't, we unless we go out and hire staff to come in and simply teach remote and simply say for the year you're going to do that. And I don't see that at this point in time we would have the funding to be able to do that.
Yep.
So we would have to really say carefully to parents, this is more self-directed. If you look at Lexington, if you look at some of the others that are out there, they gave them the option of hybrid or remote, but they clearly defined for them what remote learning was going to look like if you choose that. And it is basically self-directed with some teacher checking in on a daily basis, but it may not be your classroom teacher, just to see how assignments are going. But remote learning as part of hybrid, I envision to look very, very different than either that or what we did this past year.
And Dr. Nash, I just want to comment on that, like, where you have to be there from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Yes.
That just broadens the digital divide, the very digital divide that September was talking about.
Right.
By bringing that in there, maybe they're taking care of their peers and helping the kids with the homework.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi on a Chromebook, and I'll be the first one to tell you, it's slow.
Yeah.
You get 3 people, have to be the same place, sharing airspace, it's not going to work. I mean, it's part of the online programs, and part of this, we do have eight groups together. They have meetings. I do want to get these walking orders, the marching orders, whatever you call them, our plan for Dr. Nash to go with her admin council and talk about it so teachers know, principals know, staff knows, everyone knows, let's start getting prepared. It's doing the PD piece of films, using, there's so many things out there besides YouTube that you can make these, Edmentum and other places that you can make all these little films on. And they're just 3 to 4 minute films. Because the same thing again, is yes, how much Wi-Fi is available for kids? How slow is it? You're gonna download a 45-minute lecture? I don't think that's not in the realm of what we're looking for in this. Is again, that digital divide that Mrs. Forbes brought up, we really have to be cognizant about that as we go forward. Okay, so now another point, and then we go,
One,
yes,
that brings me to the thought of the LMS and why it's needed for this district. If kids have to keep downloading videos and accessing certain things, and we want continuity for all of our students, having a platform like that, teachers can upload those videos. They're already there. Kids can click on them. They don't have to download them. So there's things like that I think
We talked about the potential
It's
of looking
expensive.
at some of the others, but we also are very mindful of the fact that we've had a lot of teachers who have just jumped on board with
Right.
Google.
Right.
And so to introduce, Katie and I and some others talked about that, to introduce another platform right now, like Schoology or one of those.
Right.
We had some conversations where we're just getting used to.
Right.
May not be the best to do at this point in time. That, you know, we were kind of talking about that and examining some of the additional software or other things that we could do to enhance. And we made the decision that we're not quite sure that this is where we need to go right now. We know it does more, it's got more enhancements and more features to it, and it can do more, but we'd rather try to stick with something that people are now, from March to June, got more comfortable with, and then maybe make a move if we find that for the whole year, gosh forbid, something happened in November and we're out total remote for the whole year. Then, you know, I'd say maybe we can do this. Maybe people are willing to do that. I don't know.
Wouldn't it be prudent at this time to be planning for that? Because if we're told to go remote, you're not gonna have time to plan for it.
Well, when I think she was talking about was this
Right.
particular learning platform, and we had looked about, bringing that in and now having to retrain people and
Overwhelming.
move them off of Google and using all of the aspects of Google. And we just felt that our staff, particularly at the elementary level, were just getting very more comfortable. And so now to throw this on them, plus we have a brand new Envision Math program that we're putting out there that has a lot of technology, we just felt that we were going to totally overwhelm them.
Say it again.
You replace.
One last thing.
No, it doesn't
In your
replace Google.
conversation-
No, but
with
it's
them.
another platform. It
Right.
doesn't totally replace it.
I would think,
Yeah.
you know, kind of to your point, Mr. Canocchioli, not necessarily making all of our teachers do it, but if we can invest in a license for our teachers that have the strength in
Sure.
technology, and we can do a train the teacher, like, you know, that model where they train their, you know, other teachers in the district that have interest, it might be a nice way to start, maybe for the high school, maybe not the elementary school. But then again, you know what your teachers have been through, and if they're shell shocked and they're finally like, Google Classroom, I get it, and I get all this
We
other
looked at,
technology,
the
then
surveys
makes sense.
that the teachers did where we talked about technology needs. So we looked at Screencastify, that was something. We
Yeah.
looked at Nearpod. We looked at, some people mentioned Schoology as part of that.
Yeah,
We looked at, can't remember some of the others, some are learning platforms, others are not. They're more, and we did make some purchases in that area. We certainly, I think Katie did look at a district license in Schoology. I'm not sure what that was. We certainly could look to see if there was an interest and we wanted to do it and what the cost might be at a building, where a building might be ready to make that move. I was looking more from the 500-foot perspective of district-wide. Did I want a district-wide, license at that point?
No, I don't think we're in the financial need for that right now. I think one of the biggest areas of concern that bothers me again is, could we have a conversation with the town manager about making hotspots available? I know if he come up pretty close to the building, and people have done this, and they have trouble at home, some of the high school kids would come in and through their cars, open the windows, and do their homework or kind of hold a remote class, where they can get into the Wi-Fi here. So from the buildings, if we could amp our signal out a little more, you could have small groups available at the library, where parents could bring their kids. And yeah, you're doing your homework in your car, but if you have a reliable internet connection, we've got to find spots that make it work. I know it's a little extra work, but then again, after work, you do the homework in your car at some point. You may have to do it at this point if the Wi-Fi is not available at home, we'll know the speed. So if we could have that conversation with the town manager and move forward with that of creating hotspots. Okay. Anything else before I call for the vote? On the motion, so again, support Dr. Nash in a phase-in return to school using a hybrid model with the start of school for students after Labor Day. I'll call for the vote. Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Cannacchioli?
Yes, with the understanding that this isn't my final vote on the plan.
Oh, no, okay.
There has to be
Just
three.
letting you,
Thank you.
just want to
We
make
have-
that public statement.
I would make
That's
a
all.
statement right now,
Yep.
is because right now, if you look at the dates, and Dr. Nash went over these dates, she has 8 groups, and submission no later than 7/27. Preliminary plan is 7/31. DSC preliminary plan is finalized here. Following opening plan due by 8/10. So there's all benchmarks, and she moved the meeting to August the 3rd.
No, I understand, we have till,
to
we
go
have
to
that
go to
August
these.
3rd meeting to
But
make the
guess what,
vote.
we have
I
to
get
start
it.
somewhere,
No, I.
and we have to say
Again.
what the committee's intentions
Want to
are.
make it clear that
Yeah,
as long
sure.
as that
Yep.
that is not my final
So
vote.
we'll be
Good.
back to you with hopefully the plan on the
Mrs. Gri-
3rd. That's,
Thank you. Mrs. Griffin?
and then if you want to make some
Flores.
modifications.
I'm a yes. Yeah.
All right, let the record show 5 in the affirmative, and so, yes, so we'll be looking forward for updates, for feedback from groups. I know everyone should be checking their email. I think that the information be sent out, and we can do it however it gets done, to get feedback through me. We cannot deliberate, but if you're looking for something special, please contact within those groups if you see some notes coming out. And if those notes could be shared to committee members, we can go from there.
So if I might, just as a final,
Yes.
what we've eliminated, what you've voted to do is for me, to eliminate, not for the purposes of reporting to DESE, because I have to put that in the plan, but us looking at a full in-person to start the school year. So that's really what we've done. We've eliminated that. We're not gonna think about opening on whatever day with all of our kids back 100%, all of our staff back, and that's it. We'll probably look at the other 2 models, and I would say at this point in time, leaning more toward what the survey results tend to support, both from parents, to have some form of in-person, which at this point, the only other model that does that is a hybrid, so yes. And then we'll come back with the actual document that we're going to submit to DESE.
Thank you. Okay. And we do have a warrant, and I guess it's going to go over now to Mrs. Griffin, right? 'Cause-
No.
Oh, September, you're the last one?
Yep.
And this is a transition? Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Ford.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Walk me
It'd
through
be a
it.
short report.
Yeah.
Mrs. Griffin.
yes.
All right, so I have signed the following warrants: a payroll warrant dated June 25th for $168,688.64. An accounts payable warrant dated June 30th for $100,575.06. An accounts payable warrant also dated June 30th, 2020 for $359,828.46. An accounts payable warrant dated July 7th for $8,016.14. A payroll warrant dated July 9th for $88,462.59. A school lunch warrant dated July 14th for $825.33. An accounts payable warrant dated July 14th for $36,125.69. And I have not yet signed the accounts payable warrant dated July 21st. And Mrs. Griffin may decide to have me do that before she starts. If so, I would go in and sign that this week. I have already looked through that. That's my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of Mrs. Griffin, she has asked the Office of School Committee to sign an anti-racism resolution dated July 20, 2020 to Governor Baker, Senator Fatman, Representative Frost, Mass Secretary of Education Pizer, Mass Senate President Spilka, and Office of Board of Selectmen. Whereas schools have the responsibility to equip students with their civil rights of obtaining a free and appropriate public education. It is the responsibility of each school to ensure we create a welcoming community for all schools. And whereas it is the responsibility that every district provide to all district staff, including school committee members, annual professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas every district will commit to recruiting and retraining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. And whereas every district will examine their policies for institutional and systematic racialized practices and implement change with sustainable policies that are evidence-based. And whereas every district will incorporate into their curriculum the history, of racial oppression in works by Black authors and in works from diverse perspectives. And whereas we as school leaders can no longer remain silent to the issue of racism and hate that continue to plague our public and private institutions. Resolved, that the Oxford Public School District and all the districts in the Commonwealth must guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded in practice for our students, families, faculties, and staff. We must ensure our own school culture that every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist and acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to support this resolution.
Make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Discussion.
Just want to thank Mrs. Griffin for bringing this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions. I will sign my name to this when I can see the checks, the stops, and what the plan is that we will do this. Because you can sign your name to something, oh, this is great, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, we talked about it. Is oppression in the curriculum?
I know that we analyze our texts so they're not biased, things like that, and that's been a mandate by the state. Has it been a past practice that we've been on top of? No, but I know that since we've been going forth and purchasing books, that's something that I think when we were together on the last subcommittee for curriculum, we discussed that, if texts are biased or not, if they're appropriate or not. I think, honestly, Mr. Coonan, there's a new lens here where educators are slowly becoming aware that we have to do more.
I know that,
And-
I'm asking questions.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
it's gonna take time. I think people have to self-evaluate and reflect on their beliefs and their opinions and how they were schooled. And unfortunately, throughout the Commonwealth, we weren't schooled very well as students. And we're living that now, and we're slowly understanding how broken our system was. So honestly, Mr. Coonan, to your very valid point, we're making this statement, this referendum here, that we're going to do this. This is our commitment moving forward to keep our eyes open here and step up to the plate.
Yeah,
And so
that's-
we have a
well,
lot of work in front of us.
Yes, we do have a lot of work, and
Yes.
I still have more questions.
Yeah,
And the next one, our annual professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's the job of the chair, that's to provide that, and everyone will go through it, and for the entire district. Are our principals ready to sign on this as well? Is it part of the evaluation? Because this is huge.
So could I,
I'm almost done here.
all right, but I just wanted to
This is
say something.
this is the piece, oh, go ahead.
Just so, because if we were gonna talk about this earlier, but we tabled it, but I truly believe that we should be creating a subcommittee to have this be a focal point. And so within that subcommittee, you start to, get the stakeholders or the players involved, and that's where you start to kind of vet through all this stuff.
Exactly.
Because I agree, there's a lot to it, but it has to be done, and you're right. What does that look like? So that was gonna be my suggestion, was to create a subcommittee where we could have this conversation and get people in buildings and some townspeople involved and some others, because it's
it's a
Gotta
massive
be.
undertaking.
Exactly, we could add that to our standing subcommittees, when Helen asked before, I said, okay, yeah, we'll take a look at this, and that's where you plant the seeds, come out of subcommittee.
Yep.
Yes, if things can die in subcommittee, but things grow out of subcommittee. Sitting here right here, and it was just, and I'm totally support of this, but with a broad check mark, that's like passing back to the kids to the papers, and they, oh, yep, check, you're all set.
Right.
It's gotta be something.
This isn't a check. No, and I know, I don't grade like that, and probably most teachers don't grade like that anymore.
Right.
So, yes, I think that's a wonderful piece, and I'll bring that up into my report a little bit later in subcommittee in resolution. Yes, I think that's a wonderful piece of it.
So should we make a motion to establish a subcommittee to analyze, our practices and
Yeah.
support this resolution?
The first thing we'll do is we'll take the vote on this resolution. Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Well, any further discussion, I'm sorry. Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Cannacchioli?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mr. Coonan votes yes, 5 in the affirmative, motion passes. The second, and then the follow-up to that, the committee also recognizes this, and we, Pal, do you have the motion you want, Dave? You can make,
It was a great idea, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
I
Billy,
just,
please bring it down.
I'm
That's
I'm
yours.
still a veteran, even though, yeah, I don't know how you create subcommittees. I don't know if we have bylaws that we have to do that. It can be done right at the table.
School committee votes them.
So
And
just make a
I would make a
subcommittee.
motion that we form a subcommittee to work on this anti-racism
With the-
resolution and make sure that we're putting into practice everything that we're putting on this paper here, that we're reviewing our practices, that we're going through and taking time. You know, we'll have to work together to probably draft something as far as what the committee will do in the undertaking and maybe give some initiatives and to start with, but yeah, I just make that motion that we establish that committee now.
We have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
could you just clarify what you'd like the membership to look like?
sure. We'll, once I get the second, then we'll go through discussion. And we'll discuss that before we call for the actual vote.
I second her motion.
I'm moving in a second. Okay, if you look in your packets, here's kind of a template of what our subcommittees look like. Is that we have standing subcommittees right now. We have a standing subcommittee for the people at home. There's policy, and the current members are Palmina and David. Personal negotiations, David in September. School buildings and safety, September and myself. District accountability and curriculum, Pal and myself. Corey, obviously, these are all gonna be reworked. We'll be adding, the next one is the, you're gonna call it the anti-racism resolution committee?
Subcommittee, yeah. Unless somebody can come up with a more eloquent name.
Well, because it's
And we can
really,
put that out there.
it's geared right towards, are we hitting this?
Right.
Are we putting this into the curriculum? And for not just every student, but also ourselves as well, too. And we have some excellent steps that have got to be taken for that. So, what would the membership look like? Obviously, it would be 2 members of the committee. Also, where the chair and the superintendent are considered ex officio, we can step in any time, we can sit at any time. I think we're looking for guaranteed at least 5. 7?
I would hope that we would have, you know, I'm looking at the minimum that we have here. It says, you know, 2 members of the school committee, 2 staff members, and 3 members of the community. You know, I would like to see our town manager. I would like to see, you know, a representative from the town side here. I mean, we are including this resolution to go to, you know, the Board of Selectmen too. It would be nice to see them represented. I think it would bring unity to our community. And I also think that our town departments could kind of sit at the table and give
So
us some
his-
perspective.
So looking for the executive branch. either
They
town
see
manager or
things in this
selectman.
community from a different lens than
Of
we do
course
as
they
a
do.
school. I mean,
Hell,
they
I
might
sat in
open
that
our
chair.
eyes.
I sat for 3 terms in that chair.
Yeah.
I really understand that, yes. I know.
so I mean, I would feel great if we could have like our school resource officer or different members from each,
Okay, so let's take a little jot down here. So you're looking for someone from the executive branch of government, either a selectman or a town manager's office.
I would love somebody to represent our police department. you know.
Representative of OPD
And also, you know,
to,
I think it should be open to any part of the town departments that would like to step forward. I mean, at a minimum, I think we need our police department and we need somebody from the Board of Selectmen or the town manager's office. But I would like all departments to kind of feel like they'd want to be at the table and share their voice.
well, I think you get that from the executive department and then from the
Yeah.
police department, executive form of government, 2 school committees, 2 parents, up to 2,
Or at least,
at least 2 parents, that's minimum membership.
and at least 3 members of the community and hopefully more, you know.
3 community, so you're getting a very large share in the committee.
You are.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then a student.
Be great to have a student
What
voice.
about your staff representatives?
Yeah.
And do you want any administrative representatives? Because
Exactly.
they have to ensure that this is happening.
I mean, all of our other committees seem to have 2 staff representatives.
Mm-hmm. 2 staff.
And we can't have students on our subcommittees, can we?
Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're allowed to, we are allowed
All right.
to.
I know some.
We've never
places
had with
can't.
the policies and all that, but,
But I mean, it's definitely a population we want to engage.
Yes.
And whether they're on the committee, they can know when the meetings are, they're open meetings, so they can come in.
they can, yeah, there are open meetings in the student body, I think I think it's a huge member of student body. So now you have one from the executive government, one from OPD, 2 school committees, 2 staff, 3 from, up to at least 3 from the community, and 1 student.
What about district administration, is that included in staff?
That could be,
It could be, yeah, you could say that.
yes.
Mr. Goonan, if I may, on that, the School Buildings and Safety Committee, I know
Mhm.
that because the meetings were typically held at 10 a.m. during the week, you weren't able to attend. We
Right.
had an amazing showing. We had the fire department, we had the police department, we had someone from the town manager's office. I think that if they're reached out to, if you ask them, they will come. I think so, and I think that it's just a matter of us reaching out because we were very successful with that committee and getting those people together on a regular basis. So maybe some of those same people
Wonderful to hear.
will shift their committee.
Helen, you did a great job last time. Could you put together a information sent to town employees? Thank you. Okay. All right.
And just, you were asking about a name, maybe just to kind of, I was thinking, and add a subcommittee on diversity, equity, and anti-racism.
Yeah.
Diversity,
Kinda cap-
equity.
Yeah. Diversity, equity, and anti-racism, I think it kind of captures a little bit more.
Diversity. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Let our record show 5 in the affirmative, and we are pleased to announce the 2021 Subcommittee of the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism. Very good, pal, thank you. And we did adopt that resolution. All right, members' comments. Mrs. Forbes.
All right, well, first I'd like to welcome Corey. Welcome to the school committee. We're happy to have you here. I also would like to publicly thank the voters of Oxford who voted for me. I appreciate your support and look forward to another 3 years working for the students and children and people of Oxford. Congratulations and thank you to the people who stepped into the roles, Dan and Dave as chair and co-chair, and also Palmina for taking over as secretary. I'm very much looking forward to graduation on Saturday, and I appreciate and thank all the people who have done all the work to get this whole thing together. And I'm excited to learn about Naviance for the high school. That's it for me.
Thank you.
I echo the same sentiments, Mrs. Forbes. You were wonderful at giving all those shout outs, and thank you both for stepping up and representing our community and running for school committee. It's wonderful to have you both back, well, you back and you join us, Corey, especially with your knowledge of administration and schools, and it's a win for us. This is really exciting. I'm going to speak just briefly about the policy subcommittee. One thing that we're looking to do as a committee is to review our local wellness policy.
Which is in our packet, right?
It's in our packet, and Mr. Canocchioli just kind of stepped out, but he also sits on that subcommittee with me, and I believe it was his suggestion that we would review this policy, and, you know, based on like further research, it came to my attention that this is something every 3 years that we should have updates on, and we should be receiving data, and there's all different reports and whatnot that should be shared with the school committee about how our wellness policy is being implemented. I couldn't recall that occurring before. I went back and I, through my email, and I saw some discussion about the policy as far as just email saying Mrs. Hokinson's going to present to the subcommittee, and I do remember her doing that in 2014. I do believe she came in front of the policy subcommittee again in 2017, but I don't remember any specific data being shared with us about all these specifics that are outlined in the policy, and there's a lot here if you look at it. And then there's certain things that I think that the subcommittee wants to look at in particular, and one reason why I had it included in your packet is there anything that you would like us to look at with a different lens? I know that, for example, some subcommittee members brought up that they were concerned about recess. Others brought up that they were concerned about lunch times. Some students shared, it's hard to go out and then come back, but it's in our policy that we have them go out to recess first before they come into and sit down for lunch. So there's different things in here that are in our policy that I don't know if they're best practice, something to kind of review. And then also the dietary requirements and things like that that are set forth. If we receive federal money, again, it's something that we have to have reports on every 3 years. And there's got to be data that's shared with the government that I just can't recall seeing, and I don't know if any other committee member can, but so I have made a request that we receive that data, and the subcommittee will look at it, and we'd love any suggestions you have.
I did speak with Mrs. Report today, because
Yeah.
I knew that she sat on many of, over the years, policy subcommittee. She directed, particularly with this local wellness policy,
Yeah.
that the individual who would have any of that data, if it existed, would be Pat Hokinson, which I think replied to you on, so.
Yeah. And she has
Yeah.
presented in front of us before
The
in regards to speaking to the policy, but I don't necessarily recall
Right.
data.
the only other thing I would recommend, and I'm not sure, but you need to have, if you don't, a life-threatening allergy policy.
Mhm.
And that was something that all districts were required actually to submit to the state many years ago.
Right.
So if you've got this, if this is the only reference that you have, then I think I would recommend you add that to your list. There's an 84-page document that DESE, one of the better documents DESE has ever done on life-threatening allergies that all of us used when we developed it. I think it would have been somewhere between 2004 and 2008, roughly, that the law required those.
Dr. Nash, you submitted that 2 years ago.
Did I? Oh, thank you.
Oh, gosh, you got that.
Oh,
You're on the ball.
Good, okay.
I want to say that we did talk about that before, and I remember our
I must have said it 2 years ago when you didn't have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
well, our
I'm
teachers
so
were
glad.
EpiPen trained and all of
Thank
that,
you.
and that was something that we didn't, way back, we didn't have that. We do now. We've had it for quite a long time, so. Yeah, so I think that's it, and I'm excited for graduation too, and I can't thank our teachers enough for everything they've done, and I know that there's a lot of nerves and anticipation for the start of the school year for the kids, the families, and especially for our teachers and administrators, and I share that with you, and, just appreciate everything that everybody's doing to try to make plans. So.
Mr. Magnolia.
Yeah, just real quick, welcome back September. Congratulations, welcome to Corey. Corey's gonna be a great addition to our board, so looking forward to having him on. Welcome to the chair, congrats chair, back for another year, so look forward to working under your leadership. Class of 2020, congratulations, looking forward to going on Saturday morning. Weather looks good, knock on wood. Dave, I'm knocking on wood. The weather looks good. I do believe they were our last 8th grade graduating class. Official last 8th grade graduating class. So I believe they were the last ones at the middle school when I was there. So I'll be looking forward to seeing some of them through their masks, so it'll be pretty cool. I did have a question for Justin or Dr. Nash. Budget, state budget update, do we know where we're at? Any sort of where we're
So-
looking at?
Looks, Justin could probably answer that, but I can start and you can jump in. It looks like that the state still has not developed its budget, and we probably will be working on a 112 for August, Justin, also. Is that accurate? Have you heard?
No, it's my understanding with the town meeting approval, that's what we have until unless the state says otherwise with their revenue projections.
But we have no deadline yet as to when the state, budget will come out. They still say that it could be mid-August before we see anything. And we haven't had a conference call with Bill Bell, who is the DESI guru for finance. Usually he'll weigh in on what he has heard on the Hill, but that hasn't happened in the last session. So I think people are just so wrapped up in the plan that they've kind of stepped back from that, but there's nothing that I have heard coming out yet.
Okay. And also to Justin, I mean, I don't think this is ever gonna be the reality, but I think a lot of us that do follow the news heard the threat that the president has made about cutting federal funding to those school districts that don't go back. So how would that affect us, just hypothetically? Because again, I don't feel it's ever gonna happen, but I would just like to know.
Well,
So if federal funding got cut from us, what would that look like for us? Ballpark, you don't have to, I mean, I'm not gonna hold you to,
Ballpark with the entitlement grants, I'd say close to $1 million,
yeah,
over $1 million cut. With respect to food service, it'd be, off the top of my head, maybe 400,000. And again, that's just off.
yeah, no, I wasn't holding you, I just
Those
kind
would be
of,
the areas, the entitlement grants and the
Right.
food service.
all right, so that's around 10%-ish, right? What they
Yes.
claim, in 9 to 10%, okay. I think that is it for me, thank you.
Thank you. Myself, just an update on your agenda, our next meeting will be August 3rd. It is printed on the agenda the 10th, but we can change that. Again, go back to this plan that we have here. 2021 subcommittees. Again, please email me your intentions, if you intend to chair any of these committees. I do look forward to putting those together. And I think that's all I have. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Forget the new guy.
I already
Oh, you already did him?
opened the meeting, introduced Corey.
No, but I mean, his final remarks?
Oh, I know.
All
It's let him learn. Oh, yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah, just checking.
Sure. I just want to thank you all for the warm welcome. It's great to be here. Having 4 students or 4 children at different levels of the Oxford Public Schools, I have had a great experience here. Some wonderful teachers and staff. I'm very excited about the current administration that we have in place. And I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for reminding me of the last one. We are changing this configuration, this room. I really don't like it. But Corey's off on the island over there. Yeah, it's not really there. So again, we're gonna go right down to order. I'll be sitting there next time. Dave, you'll be here. Pal, you'll be here. And then September, you guys can fight over which will be on at the end. Some people like the NC.
As long as I'm
Some
allowed
people
to.
love the NC because you sit back there and then you, the late Mr. Bigwood, when I served as selectman, has a troublemaker seat. You're sitting directly across from whoever the executive, and you can have a lot of fun with that. Okay, so, floor, open the floor briefly. Comments from the floor? No, I shall close the floor. Okay, tonight we do have executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, as an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body. We will be adjourning directly from executive session. At this stage, entertain a motion to go to executive session.
I make the motion.
Moved by Mrs. Forbes. Second by Mrs. Griffin. Roll call vote. Mrs. Forbes?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffin? Yes. Mr. Cannacchioli?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And Mr. Coonan votes yes, 5 in the affirmative. We are in executive session.